What's up? Brian Tong here, and this is my review for the all-new M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro. And I have been waiting a year for this thing to happen. I mean, I am so hyped for this machine because every pretty much major thing about this is basically new. You know, the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it performs, and have I tasted it? Yes, off camera. But full disclosure, Apple provided me with this 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro in silver for the purpose of this review, and it's gonna be going right back to them, but holy crap. It's a beast with the M1 Max 10-core CPU, 32-core GPU, 64 gigs of unified memory, and a 4 terabyte hard drive right here. This is an absolute monster. So this is gonna be an in-depth review with real-world performance comparisons because that's really what matters. And I'm gonna try and cover everything that really matters, how I use this MacBook Pro as a content creator, and then who ultimately does this machine make sense for. But just to give you some perspective, I've owned this guy here. It's a fully loaded, top of the line, 2.4 gigahertz, 8-core Intel Core i9, 16-inch MacBook Pro. It has 64 gigs of RAM, and then the AMD Radeon Pro 5500M with 8 gigs of video memory. This display in here, it has a crack in the corner, and not from a drop, but sure, of course I'd show it to you, but I'm not going to because it's cracked. And this was really like the last, I'm holding it upside down this whole time too. This is also like the last top of the line 16-inch MacBook Pro until now. And it's really how I make my living. So, you know, I have this deep attachment to it, even if its fans were constantly going off on full throttle all the time. So what I did, I held off on getting the M1 13-inch MacBook Pro. I knew that it was impressive. I mean, its performance blew me away in my review when it came out, but I told myself that this would be worth the wait. And the new M1 Max MacBook Pro, wow, this thing has absolutely surpassed my expectations. So let's start off with the design here, and then we're gonna get into those performance tests. But this really feels like a love letter to the PowerBook G4 and the iBook designs of the past. You know, it has a full aluminum body, but also it's retro yet modern. And let's get this out of the way. This thing is thick with a few extra C's. I mean, I would arguably say this is probably the bulkiest MacBook Pro that I can remember over the last 10 years. It's thicker than the 2019 edition, and it's also thicker than the 2015 edition that I still have. But what I like about its design is that although it is, let's say it's blockier, its edges are rounded and they're just softer and smoother to hold. So when you pick this up, it just feels nice, because if you compare that to the previous 16-inch, I mean, yes, it's not that much thicker, but it's kind of a tapered here. It's more streamlined, you could say, but then every edge here, it's harsh. And I think maybe the best way to describe this when you pick it up is that it's sharp. So the taper design of this Intel MacBook Pro does make it feel, and you know, it makes it look a lot slimmer compared to this MacBook Pro. This new 16-inch is only thicker by 0.02 inches, so not that much. It's slightly not as wide, and it's a little deeper, but the biggest difference is its weight. I mean, this thing still weighs half a pound more compared to the Intel 16-inch at 4.8 pounds. So if you get the M1 Max version, be ready for that. I do think that that's a weight increase that you'll notice, but if you're planning to upgrade your 16-inch and, you know, you work out like me, like look at how it develops those guns, right? The weight, it's just not gonna matter as much. Now the M1 Pro version of the 16-inch, that weighs 4.7 pounds, so it's gonna be a little lighter than this one at 1/10 of a pound less. But everything about this design, it just pays homage to the past while bringing this new modern feel to it. Now, if you're debating between a 16 and a 14-inch, the 14 is obviously more portable, but it can still be configured with the same exact specs at the highest end as the 16. The new 14-inch MacBook Pro weighs 3.5 pounds compared to the 4.8 pounds of an M1 Max 16-inch, and that's gonna be a big difference there that might be a deciding factor for you. Now, you're gonna have, obviously, the shiny piano black Apple logo here. Part of me still also wants it to light up again. I mean, that's the old school part of me, but there is one really fun, cool detail that I love about this design, and the name is no longer, right? It's no longer inside of this display, but if I flip it over, on the bottom of the case, they engraved the MacBook name on it. This is not laser etched, but it's engraved, it's deep. You can feel it, and I just think it's a really classy touch. So let's just flip this back over because, yes, I'm gonna open this bad boy up, and my goodness, let's just give it to you here. The display, like, look at this thing. The display, it just pops right when you see it. I hope it pops on camera for you, but this is its gorgeous mini LED display with ProMotion. You've got the adaptive refresh rate that goes up to 120 Hertz. The bezels around here, it's been reduced to 3.5 millimeters around the entire display, but did you think that I was gonna talk about the notch as if notching was there? Look, it's there, I still see it. I've whined about enough in my videos, and like many of you, if I'm buying this, I'm telling Apple that I'm okay with it, so it's time to start accepting it. But yes, my eyes still see it all the time, and by incorporating the notch, we are actually getting more screen real estate from Apple, 16.2 inches of it diagonally to be exact, and that would otherwise be unused across the top. Now, app developers, they will have the option to make it disappear if you want to go in full screen mode, or you can use dark mode, which kind of hides it more with some of these wallpapers, which I don't. And then when you're watching anything like full screen videos or movies, you just don't see it at all because it matches that deep black because of the mini LED display. So it won't get in the way of media viewing. Now, it will be interesting to see really how developers approach how they want to deal with it. But when you run your mouse near the notch, it doesn't move around it. Like your mouse cursor actually just goes right through it. It goes right underneath it. You can go side to side to side. So it won't act like a speed bump on your screen. The notch does include an updated 1080p webcam, and I will no longer be embarrassed by my MacBook Pro's previous camera quality. I mean, it's about time we finally got this. The notch also includes an ambient light sensor to detect brightness and color temperature of ambient light, and then the LED, which is the camera indicator light, that's also in here. So that's where both of those components have been placed before on previous MacBook Pros with the larger, thicker bezels. It's here in the notch. And I've said it before, but I would have been more okay with it if there was a Face ID system in there. That makes more sense functionally to me. We know Microsoft, they've had their 1080p webcam and their Windows Hello face recognition system in their devices for years, and it works like a charm. But I get that maybe it's still too thin to fit in the display. The Face ID component could be too thick on top of the mini LED. So really, to be or not to be, that is the question that you're gonna have to answer for yourself. Now, I also do love how this display is just physically thicker, right? It's housing the mini LED display. It just feels more substantial and sturdy. I've told you, I like it thick, and the payoff here is absolutely in the new screen. But the truth is that this is probably the best display that a lot of people are gonna have out of most of their devices. It might be really the best display in your household. And this is gonna give you the deepest blacks that you've ever seen, you've ever had on a MacBook Pro, with vibrant colors that pop. It has the 1000 nits of sustained brightness, 1600 nits of peak brightness if you're watching HDR content, and then a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio. And yes, guess what? Just like the iPad Pro with their mini LED display, there are some blooming issues, but they can only really be seen typically where it's a super deep black background and bright white text or a white logo is contrasting it. Those moments are rare, but okay, they do happen occasionally. I can also tell you though, videos that capture this blooming effect on here, it appears a lot more exaggerated compared to what you actually see with the naked eye. And if it was really that bad, look, I'd tell you it's bad, but it's not. And also, I'd take a mini LED over an LCD display, which blooms even more, and I could just never get to a deep black on those displays anyways. So I'm going mini LED any day of the year. Now, ProMotion can also make things look smoother at times. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just used to it now after all these years. It's a nice check in the box, but I'm really more impressed by the image quality on this over the floaty, smooth scrolling of ProMotion. Now, for someone who keeps this laptop closed, connected to a larger display for work a lot of the time, that would be me. It's kind of a shame and a waste that I'm not always using this display that's this good. But when I'm back traveling and I'm out about, you definitely know that I'm gonna love using that, because this new MacBook Pro, this screen here is so money, and it also costs a lot of money. All right, let's get to the good stuff here, because I'm sure you've been saying through this video, Brian, how fast is this thing? Get to the performance stuff already. Okay, we're gonna get to that right now. And we know that Apple can throw all the stats they wanted us, and they have, you can watch the presentation, you can go online, you can see how significant of an improvement this machine is. The M1 Max, this is an absolute game changer, but for me, it always comes down to real world performance for me and just how it affects my workflow. So I've done my own comparisons between the fully loaded Intel MacBook Pro that I showed you from late 2019, the latest 24-inch M1 iMac with 16 gigs of memory. That's just to give us an M1 comparison. And then the top of the line M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro right here. So let's start off by looking at the quick Geekbench 5 benchmarks first. This is just to get a baseline here. I run the benchmark 10 times on each machine, running no other apps at all, and then I average out those scores. And here's what we got for performance scores. All right, for the 2019 Intel Core i9 MacBook Pro, it has single core average score of 1,237 and a multi-core score of 7,173. Also, the fans were going off at full speed during the test the entire time. It was loud. Now, the M1 iMac had a single core score of 1,743, a little bump up, and a multi-core score of 7,593, with the fan never going on during any of these tests. So that brings slightly better Geekbench scores. Now, let's get to the big kahuna, the M1 Max MacBook Pro. It had a single core score of 1,782, which is pretty similar to the M1, which that's actually not a surprise, and a multi-core score of 12,749, which is a big jump. Big jump. All right, let's look at GPU benchmarks quickly before we get into the real-world test. The 2019 Intel MacBook Pro had a score of 27,109. The M1 Mac had a score of 21,590, which was less than the Intel MacBook Pro. And the beast of all beasts, the M1 Max MacBook Pro, comes in with an average score of 67,617. Sheesh! So that's a huge difference compared to the others. Now, we know Geekbench scores, they never tell the whole story, but it just gives you an idea of how at least hardware compares to each other. But the proof, the proof is always gonna be in the pudding, and that's where we come to our real world test. Now, I use Adobe Premiere to edit my videos, and then they have a version optimized to support Apple's M1 chip now. I'm handling multiple layers of 4K video. I've got titles and graphics in real time, and it's important for me to see this as cleanly and as smoothly as possible. And then once all that's done, exporting my final video, that is one of the biggest bottlenecks for me, other than how slow I work. But I took my entire 19-minute project, which was my recent Apple Watch Series 7 review, and then I exported it onto each of the machines that we're gonna test at the maximum render quality. And I did it twice just to make sure that the export times were generally consistent. And here were the results. The Intel MacBook Pro exported my 19-minute video in 36 minutes and 59 seconds. Its fans were going on full throttle just a minute into it and through the entire export. I put my Intel machine in the freezer for a few minutes before I do any exports just to cool it down. I always do this. I did it for this. It still averaged over 36 minutes. Now, no freezer needed for the M1 iMac. I exported my 19-minute video in 19 minutes and 26 seconds. That's almost cutting the export time in half and almost a 1-to-1 ratio based on the time of my project. So those type of results from the M1 have been consistent from day one with that chip while just barely hearing the fan, if any at all. Okay, I know you're ready now. I'm ready. Let's get to the M1 Max MacBook Pro. How long do you think the export took on this machine? Okay, I want you to think of it. Keep that number in your head. I'm gonna bet it might be even lower. My 19-minute video took only 7 minutes and 34 seconds to export. 7 freaking minutes. I literally could not believe it. It blew my mind, and I knew it was gonna be ridiculous, but you can see the projections that Apple puts out there, but once you see the actual real world results, I just said, damn, like these are real world things that back up what I mean when I say that this is an absolute game changer for all creatives. And I have never seen anything like this on a freaking laptop, but there's even another level that you can take this. Now, the M1 Max MacBook Pro 16-inch model that I have right here, this is the only model with a new capability to turn on what's called high power mode. Now that enables users to get performance boosts and kind of push the hardware even harder. So you can select this mode, you go to System Preferences, then you go to Battery, and then you find energy mode. That's where you can select that, and it works while on battery or while the M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro is plugged in with a power adapter, either of them. Now this does not work for any M1 Pro machine, 14-inch or 16-inch, but only the M1 Max 16-inch MacBook Pro is the only machine that is capable of this. Now, I haven't been able to find out if there's physically anything different about the thermal system in the 16-inch MacBook Pro, or if just the larger 16-inch body allows for more efficient cooling. And the only reason that I bring this up is because the M1 iMac actually had two different cooling systems depending on which model you purchased. The base model, that had a single fan and a heatsink inside, versus the higher up models that had two fans and a heat pipe for an even better cooling system. So maybe that's something that we find out later on when someone kind of tears these apart, or maybe it's the same and it just is purely because the body is larger. I could not get to the bottom of that. So I put this M1 Max MacBook Pro into its high power mode and then exported my 19-minute video again. And this time it took 7 minutes and 18 seconds exactly both times that I rendered it out, which that was a 16-second improvement, still better in high power mode, but I didn't see, these huge gains when it came to exporting video in the high power mode. I did notice though that the bottom of this MacBook Pro actually ended up running a lot hotter, to the point where it's hot to touch after the high power mode export, versus maybe when I did a normal export, you pick it up, it's slightly warm like you'd expect, but not hot. So I'm guessing that this might come in handy with a lot more intensive work as you're actually creating content, like maybe people that are doing sophisticated 3D animation work. That's where maybe it comes into play. But I'd be the first to say that this thing has even more power than I might need right now. I mean, Apple talked about it. You can edit up to 30 streams of 4K ProRes video at one time, or up to 7 streams of 8K ProRes in Final Cut Pro without dropping a frame, because Apple's making their own chip, right? These are the benefits that they have. They can just decide to put their own media engine in the M1 Max with hardware acceleration for H.264, HEVC, ProRes, and ProRes RAW. Plus, right, they put video encode and decode engines, and then 2 ProRes encode and decode engines specifically in this M1 Max. Now here's a project of just that in action: 7 streams of 8K video with high dynamic range, acting like it's no big deal. It just plays right through like butter. Like, how spoiled are we now? This is really mind-blowing, and again, this is on a portable computer. And you aren't seeing any drop-off with performance, whether it's connected to power or just using the battery freely. Now, bottom line, the M1 Max, this is everything is advertised and even more. Like, I literally cannot believe the power in this machine, and it's legitimately going to change how professional creatives work, because what was only possible on a legit desktop workstation that you had to be sitting down at and tied to on a tower can now legitimately be done on a laptop. So yes, like I said before, it's power on a scale hitherto undreamt of.
Did you seriously just say hitherto undreamt of?
And I'll keep saying it, Tony.
I'm going to allow that.
All right, let's get to the ports. And the MacBook Pro finally responded to years of wishes to bring back more ports, but I want to get really specific with them. There are a total of 3 USB-C Thunderbolt 4 ports that support charging, DisplayPort, and up to 40 gigabits per second of data transfer. Now, the HDMI port over here, this is a welcome addition, but it only supports HDMI 2.0, which means 4K at 60 hertz. And that is fine for most things, like watching a video on a larger display, but I would have liked to see HDMI 2.1 just so that it could support 4K 120 hertz, which would match the MacBook's own display refresh rate. It would also come in handy for, let's say you're a game or an app developer who wants to see their content on a larger screen with the same refresh rate, but this is not a deal breaker. It's just something that I wish was in here. And look, no one is playing games at that refresh rate on a Mac and throwing them on a big screen 120 hertz TV to do it. Well, no one that I know is doing that I ever know is doing that, at least gaming wise on a Mac. Now this M1 Max 16-inch can support up to 4 displays at once. So that's 3 from the Thunderbolt ports and then 1 via the HDMI port. It also has an SD card slot, which is super clutch for me. Now this slot supports UHS 2, and that supports 250 megabits per second for data transfer. It's not the faster UHS 3 that hits over 600. Again, Not a deal breaker, it would have been nice, but I do want you to know these things, just kind of these little subtle details of the ports. And my friends, it's one of the last remaining Apple products that still has the headphone jack. Yay! But there is some real magic here with MagSafe 3 and Apple's new 140 watt USB-C power adapter that I have right here, and then the MagSafe 3 port right on this MacBook Pro, because it's the first one ever on the market to offer a new higher power charging standard, and that enables USB chargers to exceed 100 watts for the very first time. So Apple chose the gallium nitride format. It's also known as GaN for short, and that allows this power brick to be smaller in package. And if you look at it, I mean, it really reminds me of the Airport Express, so kind of another retro throwback. But what makes this really special is that it's USB-C power delivery 3.1 compliant. And it's one of the first such power adapters to work with the MacBook Pro, which is the first laptop on the market to use this standard. So USB-C power delivery via USB-C cables is limited to 100 watts. This new standard USB power delivery 3.1 extended power range supports power delivery up to 240 watts. So this Apple power adapter, it supports 140 watt charging. We know it has fast charging for 50% battery life in just 30 minutes when you use this, but again, it doesn't do that through USB-C, which is limited to the 100 watts charging. It only does it with MagSafe 3 with this cable that comes with this power adapter and only this setup. You can't do it any other way. Now, this is the first to do it, and we can be sure that others are gonna follow, but this is just another way that you have a very special aspect about this new MacBook Pro. Apple didn't really talk about it, but I think people will be talking about it once they get their hands on it. This computer supports Wi-Fi 6, but not the faster Wi-Fi 6E. That's pretty much ready to go mainstream. It also supports Bluetooth 5.0 and not 5.2. Now, none of Apple's current devices support Wi-Fi 6E or Bluetooth 5.2 to my knowledge, and my hunch is that it's because they have all the right chips and components that just work seamlessly with their processors right now, and I think part of it is there's no need to bring any uncertainty into it. And again, these are not deal breakers, so it's not on any other products. I would have really loved to see, though, Wi-Fi 6E on board here, because this is a computer that I'm gonna be keeping for multiple years, and you figure it'd be ready to go by then. We also cannot forget the removal of the touch bar, and we're back to a physical row of function keys and really the ability to just kind of quick tap if I want to raise up my brightness a few notches or raise up my volume. I don't have to do this, play this sliding game to figure it out. And I have a quick button right here to switch the computer between do not disturb mode on or off, just like a quick tap there. Plus, you got Touch ID, it's still here, and it's a nice big juicy button on the top right. I love it all. I know not all of you are happy about this, but getting all these new ports, getting the physical keys back, those were huge for me. And finally, let's talk battery life. The freaking battery life on this thing is amazing. And yes, it's gonna be different for everyone depending on how you use it. Now, Apple says the 16-inch jumps up from 11 hours of video playback from the previous model to 21 hours. That is just incredible. I've had this machine now for just under a week, and I deliberately used it away from my display, and I pushed it with video editing, my normal tasks, and I was still able to get through an entire day, and that runs me from basically, I would say, 8 a.m.-ish. Sure, I'm taking breaks in between, but I'm trying to use this as naturally as possible, to about 12 a.m.-ish, and I know that I run my computer harder than most people do, and what's normal, that's just my experience, but I do feel like on any other machine, I would have had to start charging it around 6 or 7 hours with what I normally put it through, so I was absolutely impressed here, but I really do think most people will be able to get to close to 2 full work days before charging it, and maybe some might be even able to get it to that third work day. I mean, it is, 21 hours? It's that good, and the machine is just that insane, and we know that Apple kind of underestimates or underreports the battery life, but I just walked away nothing but impressed with this. So yeah, the battery life is killer. So, okay, everybody, who is the new MacBook Pro for? I think that's probably the biggest question. You're watching this, you're like, this doesn't apply to me, but I like it. Oh, I'm not gonna use that, but I like it and I want it. Well, Apple has built so much power into this machine they have really made this new MacBook Pro for pros first, but then anyone can still buy one if they want the best laptop that Apple has to offer. Now, if you're my friend, you're like one of my peeps, and you tell me that you're primarily web browsing, you're doing emails, word processing, maybe some lighter photos and video work, you could even be using Final Cut Pro. As a good friend, I'd honestly point you to an M1 machine first before you look at the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. Now, if you're a creative professional in any way, shape, or form, and you want to be mobile, I just don't see how you can turn your back on this machine. It's freaking incredible. Now, if you're a developer or programmer and you're on the Mac, this machine also, this is for you. And if you want the best of the best, even if you'll be using maybe like 20 or 30% of what it's capable of, and that's up to you, if your wallet can handle it, this is also for you. But this is not a product that I'm saying all of you need to get and all of you need to go out and buy it and have it right now. So mama, you're gonna be able to be just fine with what you have, or when the day comes, you get an M1, and that'll probably hold you over for the next 5-10 years. But this M1 Max MacBook Pro, honestly, right now, in this moment, it has more power than I have ever had in a machine. It's gonna change my workflow. I'm not gonna have to deal with laggy, chugging timelines with all these layers of video I work with. And I know that I'm gonna have more than enough headroom to then play with 8K video comfortably in the future if I want to on this machine. Like, even that is just unreal. On a freaking laptop connected to power or just running on plain battery. That is an important distinction that this thing has. And it is absolutely quiet. That is so understated, right? People who experience the M1 understand what powerful and quiet computing feels like, and that is probably one of its most underrated features. I listen to fans probably I feel like 80% of the time while I'm working on my other laptop. So the power in a laptop like this, running this efficiently without fans going off like a wind tunnel in this elegant of a package, it just can't be matched. Now, the new 16-inch MacBook Pro starts at $2499 for the M1 Pro model. That's with the 10-core CPU and 16-core GPU and 16 gigs of unified memory. That's already a whole lot of power for most people, but it will also have plenty of overhead to last for more than a few years. Now, this one that you're looking at that we're talking about today, the M1 Max 16-inch configuration that I have, it starts at $3499. That is $3,499. That's the 10-core CPU, 32-core GPU, and 32 gigs of memory. It's also the only machine that offers the high power mode for a little more performance boost. But if you want to max out the M1 Max all the way to 64 gigs of memory and an 8 terabyte hard drive, you're looking at $6,099 before tax. A 3-year Apple Care plan for this machine is $399 on top of that, and it's also $279 for the 14-inch. Those are new pricings for these new laptops. I just don't have the words to say how insanely great these machines are. I'm leaning on it like it's my friend. This thing is ridiculous. We have never seen anything like this on a laptop, and Apple, they've created another major shift in the PC industry with the M1 Max and the M1 Pro. It can't be overstated what Apple has accomplished here. This is year two for the Mac and Apple Silicon, and they're still just getting started. So maybe 5% of users, if even that, they're gonna really untap all of its power here. It's honestly a small group of people that really need this machine. I'm never gonna tell people how to spend their money because, hey, you do you, and you're gonna have to decide if the 14-inch or this 16-inch is the right one for you. The 13-inch MacBook Pro, that was always the sweet spot for years, and I can admit that even though I'm a 16-inch guy, the 13 was the one that I point to people first. I'd also still say that the 14-inch model, that does make the most sense for most people looking at a new MacBook Pro because you can also match the same exact specs in here as you can there. But this is easily the best product from Apple in 2021, and it's arguably the best tech product that we have seen in this entire year. It's that special. And also, if you're worried about it being slightly bigger and heavier, I got 3 words for you. Thicker is better. And it's quieter too. And that's a super duper Apple. And I don't think I've ever given one of those, but it is so good. It is so good. It deserves it. It's also so good that, I just gotta wait for mine to come in about another month or 2. Yikes.